because a lot of Americans are seeing their paychecks not keep up with their expenses. Number two is we need to get healthcare off the backs of businesses and families and move towards a single payer system, Medicare for all, because as an entrepreneur, it makes it harder to hire people. When you do hire people, you want to make them contractors and not full-time employees. It makes it harder for people to start businesses because they're concerned about keeping their health care for their families. So we got to get health care off the backs of businesses and families and try and make the economy more dynamic. And we spend twice as much on healthcare as other countries do to worse results. Like it's right now we're in like the worst of all worlds. And the third thing is... And I reference my wife when I talk about this. So my wife is at home with our two boys, 6 and 3, one of whom is autistic. And what I say is like, what is her work valued at in GDP? And then people think about it and they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, 0, because GDP like doesn't consider that actual economic contribution. And then I say, we have to do is we have to actually evolve from GDP as a measuring stick. Because it actually doesn't work for us. It's almost 100 years old. We made it up during the Great Depression. Self-driving trucks are going to drive GDP way up, but it's going to be very, very bad for many people and communities. So we have to actually change the measuring sticks to something that would actually make our economy work for us, make it so that the market serves us instead of all us being inputs to the market. Because if we're all inputs to the market, we lose to robots and AI, hands down. And it's not like it doesn't matter if you were like a really conscientious, hardworking truck driver or like a really lazy, sloppy one. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if you were like a really diligent radiologist or like doesn't matter. So we have to shift the market's emphasis to actually fuel our well-being and change from GDP, which is, again, this archaic measurement we made up, to things that would actually correspond to how we're doing. Things like health, childhood success rates, environmental quality.
How do you quantify that? How would you quantify that in a way that would be translatable to the average voter?
Yeah, so we have measurements for most of these things. And again, if you look at our numbers right now, you'd see it's like, what? Like, how many people listening to this know that America's life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years? That to me would be like a pretty important measurement. But
and
like,
you think that's because of, is it because of suicide? Is it because of drug overdose? Is it because of obesity, diet? What is it?
The two causes that people point to the most are that drug overdoses and suicides have overtaken vehicular deaths as the most frequent deaths in the United States.
I didn't know that suicide was on that list. I knew that drug overdoses had taken obesity. But suicides have overtaken obesity as well?
Suicides have overtaken car accidents. I'm not sure about obesity.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant car accidents. I misspoke. So car accidents used to be number one.
Yeah.
Suicides are higher than car accidents now.
Yeah.
So suicides, drug overdoses, and then car accidents? Like, or suicides and drug overdoses like equal?
I think drug overdose is number one.
Number one.
And then suicide's number 2.
Wow.
And so that's why life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years.
And you think that and very much likely there's at least some of the number of the suicides are related to economic disparity.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you look at the suicide rate, it's particularly pronounced in 50 to 54-year-old white Americans, which are the population. I mean, you resemble that.
That's me.
Yeah, that's you. Which resembles the population that right now is just reaching a point where they're like, hey, my job skills don't have any, utility in the marketplace. And then they go home and they just start looking around and being like, what am I doing? I mean, it's really dark. It's punitive. It's punishing. And we've put our citizens in the situation where we all see ourselves as economic inputs. What the market says we're worth is what we're worth. And if we're worth less, then it's our fault. And so the next move is to say, okay, I guess, this place, there's no place for me here.
I don't mean to sound skeptical, but I just don't believe that $1,000 a month is going to fix that. It seems like that would be a good thing, certainly not moving in the wrong direction, certainly moving in the right direction, but it seems that there needs to be some sort of a massive rethinking of civilization itself. If you're going to have that many things that are going to be automated and that many people that are going to be out of jobs and feeling that the world that they prepared for no longer exists.
Yes.
It seems like we need a step further, another move.
100%, brother. And that's one reason why the freedom dividend is not it doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
The problem is fundamentally one of reconstituting means of structure, purpose, and fulfillment in people's lives, particularly in men's lives.
Right. How do we do that?
Right. So one important aspect of that is to actually start measuring how we are doing as a society and saying that's actually where we're trying to go.
So instead of using GDP,
Yes.
using some sort of other quantifiable method of measuring health and happiness and fulfillment.
Yes. Levels of engagement with work, in mental health. I mean, we have measurements for that. We are sophisticated enough to do that. And then if we say, then as president, I'm going to be up there in 2021 being like, oh, here's the State of the Union and here's like the data. And then we're going to say, you know what we're going to try and do? We're actually going to try and move those measurements in the right direction. So let's try and get drug overdoses down by 50% in 2 years. Let's try and get our mental health up a little bit, like in these ways, and then make it so that that person who's at home being like, okay, like, you know, like there's not a job for me. I'm getting $1,000 a month. That does not solve all my problems. It takes the edge off. But then we can hopefully start reconstituting what that person's purpose is in their community, in their neighborhood. And so one of the things that I'm going to point out is that if you pump $1,000 a month into that neighborhood,